Ian Hartitz here, top 10 wide receiver plays for week 12. At number 10, I got Cooper Kupp. And I know it's been a rough stretch recently, but honestly, this is one of those guys where getting Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks back is going to help Kupp, not hurt him. He already gets all the targets. Now he's just getting guys that can help take away attention. We got Jared Goff going back at home. Been too long since Kupp has had a great game. I think he gets one this week. Number 9, I have Julian Edelman. Currently, Edelman joins Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen, and DeAndre Hopkins as the league's only players with at least 100 targets. I do believe the best way to attack the Cowboys is in the slot, avoid those big outside cornerbacks. That's where Edelman has thrived almost his entire career. Number 8, I have Chris Goblin. It's been a rough stretch recently. Under 75 yards in 4 straight games, and we saw the guy clear 120 receiving yards in 5 of his first 7 games. We know the ceiling's there. He's playing the Falcons, who I know have been good the last 2 weeks, but come on. This is Chris Goblin. He's gone too long without a blow-up. Good spot. Number 7, I have Tyler Lockett, the overall PPR wide receiver 6 this season. Already a career-high 76 targets. It's amazing what happens when you give the most efficient players in the league an actual workload. We've seen the results. I know he has the leg injury, but he had an entire bye week to get better. We're already hearing reports that he will be fine to go out there and play. Eagles secondary is not one to fear. Number 6, I think this is the week, people. Odell Beckham Jr. He will be shadowed by Nick Needham. That's right, N-I-K, Nick Needham. Do not fear this guy. In fact, target him. John Brown just went for 9 catches, 137 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Dolphins' underqualified cornerback 1. Look, it's been an unlucky 2 weeks for OBJ. He got on the inch line last week. Week before that, got a couple defensive pass interferences called in the end zone. A breakout is near. Number 5, I have Davante Adams. It's been a rough stretch. Only Mike Williams and Robert Woods have more targets this season without a receiving touchdown among all wide receivers. With that said, we can be more confident in Adams' health coming off the Week 11 bye. His yards per route run metrics are all very much elite. Double-digit targets back-to-back games. I'm not worried about 49ers defense that does not move their cornerbacks. Number 4, I have DeAndre Hopkins. The floor is there for Hopkins. He has at least 5 catches in a league-high 13 consecutive games. I think the ceiling could be there soon as well. His 142 air yards last week were his most since week 1. Keep Nuke at the very top of your wide receiver rankings. Number 3, I have Mike Evans. I mean, we're talking about potentially the most fantasy-friendly wide receiver in the entire league right here. He has 1,510 air yards this season. No one else even has 1,200. So Mike Evans is getting more bombs than anyone else. Keep him as a high-end wide receiver 1 regardless of the matchup, and he just so happens to have a very winnable matchup this week. Number 2, in addition to OBJ week, it could very well be Julio Jones week. He has gone 7 consecutive regular season games without a touchdown. This is the 3rd time this has happened in Julio's career. The previous 2, he responded by busting out of those slumps with 3 consecutive games with touchdowns. So, again, good players that go this long without finding the end zone, it doesn't keep happening. Fire up Julio this week. And number 1, Mr. Michael Thomas. Joins Smokey Brown as the only wide receivers with at least 50 receiving yards in every game. No one has more targets. If we've learned one thing in the 2019 season, it's that you can't guard Mike. Those are my Week 12 wide receiver rankings. Best of luck to everyone in their matchups this week and beyond.
Hey friends, John Daigle here, and these are my top 10 running back plays for Week 12. Number 10, Chris Carson. Despite his subpar 4.2 yard per carry and inefficient 6 fumbles on the season, the Seahawks continue pounding Carson for 20 carries a game, including 20-plus touches in 6 of his last 7 contests. Rashad Penny has stayed an afterthought despite being drafted in the first round last year, which has turned Carson into a matchup-proof every-down option. Number 9, Aaron Jones. Yes, Aaron Jones has an extremely tough matchup against the 49ers front 7 this week. But not only have the Niners recently allowed over 130 yards rushing per game in their last 4 contests, Jones remains extremely touchdown dependent and has averaged 4.4 targets and 15 touches per game since Jamal Williams returned and continued splitting carries with him in Week 6. Number 8, Leonard Fournette. It's a squeaky wheel week for Leonard Fournette as a whole after the team came out and said they need to quote-unquote reestablish him behind their line of scrimmage after he's handled just 16 and 15 touches over their past 2 weeks. Remember, he previously averaged 25 touches per game in his first 8 performances, making him an extremely touch-heavy running back to lean on against the Titans. Number 7, Saquon Barkley. Recency bias will shy most fantasy players away from Barkley, given his 13-carry dud against the Jets the last time we saw him before the Giants' bye. But Barkley confidently averaged 15 carries and nearly 7 targets per game in his 6 performances prior to that one. Number 6, Josh Jacobs. It is inarguably Jacobs' toughest match to date against the Jets' suffocating front seven, but he still projects to handle over 20 carries behind one of the best offensive lines in the entire league. Number 5, Ezekiel Elliott. It wasn't the case for Miles Sanders this past week against the Patriots' front seven, but the fact is the Patriots had been pummeled up the gut in 2 previous games before that against Mark Engram, who rushed for 100 yards, and Nick Chubb, who also rushed for 100 yards. I would imagine New England takes away Dak Prescott as they have a tendency to take away the team's best offensive player, which makes Zeke rushing for 120 yards and a touchdown truly projectable. Number 4, Nick Chubb. Even with Kareem Hunt back in the fold over the past 2 weeks, Chubb's averaged 23.5 carries in that span. Cleveland is 11-point home favorites in this matchup, arguably projecting Chubb with the highest carry total of any running back of any player in his position in Week 12. Number 3, Derrick Henry. A true run funnel, Jacksonville's allowed 113 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs, most recently allowing both Marlon Mack and Jonathan Williams in Week 11 to eclipse the century mark in the same game. Henry still averaged 18.5 carries per game with Ryan Tannehill under center and will likely explode for another 100-yard game in this matchup. Number 2, Alvin Kamara. Since returning from his ankle injury after New Orleans' bye in Week 10, Kamara has averaged 8.5 carries and a whopping 9 catches per game as one of the 2 primary playmakers behind Michael Thomas in the Saints offense. They will both continue having, as they have had the past 2 weeks, a 25% target share in this concentrated target tree from Drew Brees, and that shouldn't change over the next 6 games the Saints enter the home stretch. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey. Even in tougher matchups against the 49ers, Bucks, and Rams, McCaffrey scored 30.5 fantasy points, 21.7 fantasy points, and 45.9 fantasy points as he continues to boast the highest floor of any player in fantasy football whatsoever. On pace to break Chris Johnson's single-season record for the most yard per scrimmage set back in 2009, McCaffrey is a matchup-proof number 1 overall play each and every week despite the opponent he faces.
Josh Norris here with your top 5 quarterback plays for Week 12. Let's start off with Deshaun Watson against the Indianapolis Colts. It's been surprising. Watson's in a bit of a dry spell right now, just 1 top 10 week in his last 4 games. I know the Colts defense is really shaping into form right now, but if the Texans are going to make the playoffs, and they're 6-4 right now, Watson will have to carry them with the big plays that he creates in the backfield and down the field. So if you believe in the Texans this week, believe in Deshaun Watson. Number 4 is Drew Brees against the Carolina Panthers. And we know the Panthers are absolutely plummeting. The Falcons threw all over them last week. And it's crazy to think that Drew Brees has only played 4 full games this season. And over the last 3, he's averaging 300 yards and 2 touchdowns per game, playing behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And guess what? This one's in a dome. So fire up Drew Brees as the quarterback for this week. Russell Wilson checks in at number 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Seahawks are coming off a bye, and Russell Wilson is on a hot streak. 8 touchdowns in his last 3 games. This Eagles defense has certainly improved, and it's because of a healthier secondary, and that pass rush can always be a problem against the Seattle Seahawks offensive line. In fact, for some reason, Philadelphia is home favorites here. That's shocking, but it also wants us to play Russell Wilson even more as an underdog, possibly having to put points up on the board. We always want to play Russ when Russ is cooking, and that should happen this week against the Eagles. Number 2 is Matt Ryan against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Look, the Falcons absolutely stink. They're just 3-7 on the year, despite being a little bit better these last 2 games. But despite all of that, this entire season, Matt Ryan has been playing really, really good football. And last week against Carolina, he had 300 yards and a touchdown in the air, which is a couple yards away from more scores in the end zone. And this week, obviously, the Bucs matchup is an even easier one. Tampa Bay has allowed a top 10 scorer in 7 of their last 8 games. This is going to light up with Matt Ryan against Tampa Bay. Finally, number 1, you know who it is. I know who it is. That's Lamar Jackson against the Los Angeles Rams. This one's simple. Lamar Jackson has scored 20 or more fantasy points in every game but 1 this season and is coming off throwing 7 touchdown passes over the last 2 games. And while the Rams defense is a defense we really should be worried about because they're strong on that side of the football, basically no one No one in the league has been a match to stop Lamar Jackson this season. Josh Norris here, this time with the top 5 tight end plays for Week 12. We'll start off at number 5, Evan Engram against the Chicago Bears. He's coming off an injured foot, and hopefully he plays in this game. Sprained feet can be issues for multiple weeks in the season, but prior to that injury, he went 4 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown, and then 6 catches for 48 yards. We know the Bears defense is good, right? But it's not at that 2018 caliber where we want to stay away from opposing players. And if the Giants are going to be competitive at all, Daniel Jones has to throw the football to Evan Engram. So expect, again, if he plays, at least 6, 7, 8 targets in this game. At number 4 is Zach Ertz against the Seattle Seahawks. The Eagles offense has no explosion, no playmakers. And Zach Ertz has been the beneficiary of that. 11 targets and 9 receptions in each of his last 2 games. And the yardage totals in those games, 103 and 94. But just 9.3% of Zach Ertz's fantasy points this season have come via touchdowns. Expect that number to jump up as we approach the end of the season. Touchdown regression favorable is headed his way. Number 3 is Mark Andrews, the Baltimore Ravens tight end, against the Los Angeles Rams. Andrews is the most consistent player in the Ravens passing game, which is shocking considering he's only playing about 50% of the Ravens snaps this season. But he does have the highest route run total among all tight ends across the league and the highest target rate among all tight ends across the league. 3 touchdowns over his last 2 weeks. He's a very safe bet against the Rams. Darren Waller from Oakland Raiders checks in at number 2, facing the New York Jets. The Raiders offense just keeps impressing, despite our preseason thoughts, negative ones, on Derek Carr, Tom Cable, John Gruden. And while Waller's usage dipped a little bit for multiple weeks against the Bengals last weekend, he bounced back with 7 targets, and the Jets are 8th in receptions allowed per game to tight ends. Number 1 is George Kittle against the Green Bay Packers, another tight end who has missed some time this year. Hopefully he returns. We're crossing our fingers for that one. And typically I don't like starting skill position players that are coming off multi-week injuries, but we'll make an exception here for George Kittle, who is just not a mortal, and he's the best tight end in the NFL. And we know that Ross Dwelly caught 2 touchdown passes last week in his absence.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.